Did you know that Business Central has different functional table types and characteristics?
Hii ni Tech na Msangi ya jishinde.com.
As part of this learning module, I am using the Microsoft documentation more because I want to stick to the real information about a very key information that all Business Central developers should know. So there's a lot of data movement that happens in Business Central. Data moves from one table to another, from you, the user, with the information that you're uploading from the different sources that you get the information. Could be vendors, could be customers, the information about them, and it's getting uploaded into Business Central. And definitely there are several functional areas or modules that are specific to a functionality in Business Central. For example, receivables, payables, relationship management, inventory management, and so on and so forth. And definitely when you look at the pattern, so we have different characteristics of the table types that are contained in Business Central, and we have master, supplemental, setup, register, subsidiary, ledger, journal, document, and document history table. So as a quick view, the master is the most important entity, and it's the main entity or the primary focus of the specific functional areas. And we can say the customers is for receivables and the vendors payables and sort of items inventory, or the GL we have the general ledger, we have the general ledger, we have the chart of accounts for the master table. The supplemental table, so if you want to enrich the master data with supplemental data, then supplemental tables, they store information that is related to countries, maybe currency, description, and they aren't as important, but they provide additional information to the master table. Then we do have the setup table. So you have had, if you've opened Business Central, you have heard of the general ledger setup, the item ledger setup, or so let's go back a little bit behind, because we do have the master tables in customers, vendors here that are related to a specific item or functional area of in Business Central. All right. And definitely I was saying you have heard about, okay, let me go back again. Supplemental. We'll look at examples at the end. Let me just cover this. So the setup, when you're creating a solution, definitely you'll need some configuration for the solution. And the setup information is used to organize the data. And mostly they have one record. And we look at the characteristics of each table and how the pages should be defined, because it's so important. Even as you're using AI as your pair programmer, the basics, this is one of the concept that is the foundation of AL programming or extending tables. It's to understand how the base application is structured. There is a pattern, there is a specific pattern with which the base application is built. So considering this pattern, that's why we need to follow this. So if you're wondering why we are just looking at this theoretical part, and of course the general ledger setup, inventory setup, so they are for a specific module. You have a setup that is for that particular module. And of course the GL setup, sales and receivable setups, purchases and payable setup, and register table. And so functions as a table of contents for its corresponding ledger tables. It registers historical transactional kind of information. So this is a history table. It has got GL register, item register tables, and definitely the information that is moving from the ledger tables goes into the register tables. The subsidiary tables, they contain a combination of the master and the supplementary table, like item, vendor, and maybe FA depreciation books tables. And so they will contain information that will have most likely a composite key, for that case, the vendors that belong to a certain item, or um, the contacts for a customer. No, maybe probably the what is an example? I'm trying to get an example. Item substitutes. No, that's not an example. But of course, when you have such information with a composite key, where one of the table is the master table, then you have the subsidiary table, and definitely ledger tables will contain the functional transactional information like the customer ledger entry, item ledger entry, vendor ledger entry, FA ledger entry, or fixed asset ledger entry. Then journal tables, all transactions are booked through journals. So it's the primary transactional entry. And we have the purchase journal, item journal table, general journal. So these are examples of the journal tables, because they book the transaction, the primary entry of the transaction. And we do have also the document tables, and such tables are you will need such tables like the sales quote, sales order, purchase invoice, purchase order, purchase line, and they're secondary transactional tables, and they're always comprised of two tables like the document header and the line. Same with the page. At times, when you're creating a document and the line, you always use the document page and the list part instead of just the whichever page that you want, like a card page. It could work, but definitely the document page is the one that is meant for that purpose. The document history tables, they contain their historical version of the document tables, and when you post documents from the document tables, then like the posted sales invoices, they go through the journal table and end up in the document history table. So the sales header will get the sales invoice header, and the sales invoice line, which is a history table, it contains information that has been posted. And we are looking at examples of master tables like these ones: customers, vendors, items. And maybe let's look at one document tables. When you do a sales quote or a sales order, you trigger a document table, and this is the sales header and the sales line. Very important to understand the different characteristics of this specific master and document table. Then we have the register tables like GL entry, GL registers. GL register. So it registers the historical or transactional information. So there is this and the ledger table. So these are different. So the GL entry will be a ledger, not a register. So the register table will be like the GL register. And which example was it? Item register table. Let me see. Which table is that from Microsoft? Oh, item registers. So any table with a register, it will definitely be a register table. Let me see. User time registers, FA registers, no information. Not all application areas, but do you have a vendor register? Because not all modules do have a register table. So it's quite interesting to see how you end up with a register table, because this is information that comes from the ledger entries. Vendor register. This is just a report and an analysis table. All right. So we will look at specific tables like master table in its entirety, a video on supplemental table, on setup table, register, and the characteristics. There are some characteristics that are there because it's good to understand how the base application is operating, because when you're developing an extension there is a certain pattern that you should use, and the pattern will be based on understanding how the base is done, because you're not building from scratch, you are extending Business Central. So that's it for day what? That is day 8. See you in day 9.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss the next one.